I don't know about you, but when I think about the greatest directors working today, a few different names come to mind. You have Christopher Nolan, you have Denis Villeneuve, and honestly, those are the first two I think of. But going further down the list, the next names are ones like Paul Thomas Anderson and David Fincher. And it may just be me, but one name that just doesn't enter my mind when I think of the best active filmmakers working today is Steven Spielberg, and I feel like I'm not alone. But that being said, why is that the case? We're talking about a guy who just might be the greatest director of all time, who has a better total catalog than probably any director ever. He's still making movies at a fairly frequent rate, and yet he still doesn't even feel like that important of a figure these days. I think there are honestly some pretty big reasons for that are easy to diagnose right off the bat. First of all, he doesn't tackle major franchises these days like other people do. Nolan made Batman and is adapting The Odyssey, which is one of the most iconic stories of all time. Villeneuve made a sequel to Blade Runner, and he's doing the next James Bond, and he's adapting the Dune franchise. But Spielberg, he adapted some huge books decades ago, but he hasn't really tackled anything of that nature in a long time. Another factor is that while Nolan and Villeneuve market their movies like these big events, using IMAX cameras and maxing out the movie's cinematic quality, Spielberg is largely kept to his own older ways. He doesn't work with companies to create new cameras like Nolan. He doesn't work with cinematographers like Greg Fraser and Roger Deakins to make every frame look like a painting and mess around with a bunch of different lenses the way Villeneuve does. And that's not a bad thing, it's just not quite his style. But what about people like Tarantino and Scorsese? Those guys have been making movies for a while, just like Spielberg, and honestly, they were probably in their prime at the same time as him, but they still feel like larger-than-life figures even to this day. I think the reason for that is actually pretty simple. Spielberg just hasn't been as selective with what he wants to direct as they have. In the 21st century, Martin Scorsese has only made 9 movies, and Quentin Tarantino has only made 7. And Spielberg? How about 21? I'm not saying that making a lot of movies is a bad thing. In fact, I think directors staying consistent is one of the biggest things lacking in Hollywood today. That being said though, Spielberg hasn't exactly been the picture of consistency the last couple decades. Sure, he's making a lot of movies and some of them have been great, but for every Catch Me If You Can, there's a Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. For every Minority Report, there's a BFG. For every Lincoln, there's a Ready Player One, which I actually like, but it just doesn't feel like something a director with Spielberg's level of prestige would make. It's just kind of a weird filmography over the past couple decades. When you go to the theater to see a Nolan movie, you know what kind of film you're going to get, but with Spielberg, it's a complete wild card. And another part of that is he doesn't write his own stuff. He works with a lot of different writers with a lot of different dialogue and pacing styles, and that's not rare, it's just that we live in a day and age where the best directors are writing their own movies. Nolan writes his movies, Villeneuve has written the Dune films, Tarantino writes his, PTA writes his, so it's rare to see someone like Spielberg doing that. So when I say all of this, I'm sure it probably doesn't make sense that the title of this video is that Steven Spielberg is back. What does that mean? Well, when I talk about these trends that he's following, I look at the last few years and I feel like it's getting vastly better. When we look at his resume in the 2020s, we can see that he directed West Side Story, which got him a Best Picture nomination as well as a Best Director nomination at the Oscars. Then he did The Fabelmans, with the same being true at the Oscars for that one as well. And when I look at The Fabelmans, I see a deeply personal movie with a heightened level of emotion and heart to it, which isn't something Spielberg has really delivered consistently over the last couple decades. A big part of that is that he co-wrote the script, which for him is rare, but the reason he wrote it is because it's his own life story. It's clearly a movie that means a lot to him, a lot more than the kind of movies he was making in the 2010s, where it felt like every couple years he would just find a script that struck his fancy and do that. Another sign of that newfound selectivity with his scripts came when he turned down the 5th Indiana Jones film. He could have directed it, and it probably would have been better than it was, but even he understood that it was time to step away. And then we have his most recent film, Disclosure Day. Not only did he come up with the idea for the film all on his own, but he went out and got David Koepp to write the script, who is honestly one of the greatest screenwriters of our generation. And then what did he do? He dragged John Williams, probably the greatest composer of all time, out of retirement to write the score for the film. It feels like he's going harder to make his movies as great as possible than he has in a long time. So how about Disclosure Day? Is it great? In my opinion, yes it is. I know there's a lot of discourse around the movie, but I absolutely loved it. Probably more than anything he's done since Catch Me If You Can, which was over 20 years ago. I think his knack for blockbuster filmmaking is on point here. I think his visuals are just about as great as they ever have been, and it's clear that an alien movie like this is right up his alley. Over the last few years, he's proven that he can still direct at an elite level, so why do I say that he's back but not for long? Well, I say that because I have a suspicion that this isn't going to last as long as I wished it would, and that all has to do with Disclosure Day itself. As much as I love the film and think it's an absolutely riveting watch, I can also look at it and acknowledge it has some problems. If there really was evidence that proved aliens exist in our real world, with all due respect, getting it on live news is not the way that would go down in real life. The news is not really a big part of culture these days. It feels like a script that was written for, I don't know, the 1990s. But it's not just that. There are also just some huge logic issues that left me scratching my head throughout the entire movie. There are multiple times where the protagonists are just straight up cornered by the bad guys, defeated, but then they escape because the bad guys just let them. It's truly some of the most insane plot conveniences and lack of logic from the antagonist I've seen in a movie in a while, and all of this feels weird in an otherwise phenomenal movie. The emotions work, the visuals work, but the logic and world building don't. So what does that tell me? I think it means that right now, we're dealing with a director who still has his decades of understanding of how to make a great movie, but whose grasp on the world his movies exist in is starting to slip. So where does that leave us? I believe we're looking at an interesting time in Steven Spielberg's filmography where it feels like he's starting to hit his stride again, delivering hit after hit with a heightened level of care and personal investment put into them. But on the other hand, it feels like his old age is starting to come through a little bit, even if only marginally in his filmmaking. These two forces are pulling in opposite directions right now, and even though I think his talent and experience is much stronger at the moment, I can't say for sure that his age won't eventually catch up and overtake it in terms of how it affects his movies. That's why I feel like every Spielberg right now is important and something to be cherished, because I think we've gotten complacent with the fact that perhaps the greatest director of all time is still delivering amazing movies, despite being almost 80 years old. And so all in all, as much as I hate it, it seems like we're entering the beginning of the final chapter of Steven Spielberg's legendary filmmaking journey, and I think that's worth appreciating while we still can. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe so I can know to make more videos like this. Leave a comment down below with your opinion on this. Do you think that Spielberg is back? Do you think he's making great movies again? Do you think that Disclosure Day could have been better? I want to hear it all down in the comments below. But with that being said, again, thank you so much for watching, and God bless.